How Soviet Russia created history by launching the Salyut. History was made in 1971 after the Soviet Union placed the world's first space station, Salyut, in orbit, laying the foundation for present-day space stations like the International Space Station, ISS, and China's Tiangong. The Cold War was at its peak, with the Soviet Union led the space race initially by placing the world's first satellite in orbit in 1957, crashing the first object on the Moon in 1959, sending the first human into space in 1961, and accomplishing the first successful unmanned landing on the Moon in 1966. However, the US interrupted this winning spree of the Soviet space program by putting humans on the Moon for the first time with its Apollo 11 mission on July 20, 1969, only 17 days after the Soviet Union's second N-1 lunar launch vehicle blew up. This ended the Moon race, prompting the Soviet Union to hunt for a bigger prize and decided to build the world's first civilian Earth orbital space station. In 1966, the Soviet Union began working on a secret military space station program called Almaz, with the first launch planned in the early 1970s. Almaz was supposed to be a 20-ton module regularly visited by crews of 2 to 3 cosmonauts traveling on Soyuz crew transport spacecraft. However, after losing the Moon race, it was decided that the Almaz space frame would be repurposed for a civilian space station weighing 18 tons that could be launched using a Proton Universal Rocket 500K, UR-500K. Salyut 1 Space Station. The idea was to take the Almaz's space frame, install Soyuz systems such as orbital maneuvering engines and solar arrays onto it, and create a new docking tunnel with a hatch to reach the interior. The work on the space station began in February 1970 at the facility, now known as RKK Energia in Kaliningrad, present-day Korolyov, outside of Moscow. The final module was ready by February 1971, when it arrived at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan for final testing and outfitting before the launch. While initially designated as Zaya, it was renamed Salyut during a pre-flight readiness review 10 days before the launch to avoid conflict with China, which was developing a spacecraft with the same name. It would also help in avoiding any confusion during communication sessions with the Soviet Flight Control Center that used Zaya as its radio call sign. Finally, on April 19, 1971, the Salyut 1 was lifted off using a 3-stage UR-500K that successfully delivered the world's first space station into orbit. The space station measured 20 meters in length and weighed over 20 tons, providing 3,500 cubic feet of habitable volume. It had dining and recreation areas, food and water storage, a toilet, control stations, exercise equipment, and scientific equipment. The total scientific equipment weighed 1.3 tons and included experiments to study human adaptation to long-duration spaceflight, various telescopes for solar and astronomical observations, and instruments to observe the Earth. Crewed missions to Salyut 1. 2 days after the Salyut 1 took off, Soyuz 10 was also launched, carrying a crew of 3 cosmonauts to the space station with a plan to stay in space for 30 days, but upon reaching the station, the cosmonauts could not dock with Salyut 1 due to problems with its hatch. The crew was forced to turn around because of limited supplies aboard their spacecraft, and it returned to Earth the next day, making a rare night landing in Kazakhstan. Following the failure of the Soyuz 10 mission, Soviet engineers redesigned the docking probe and updated dock procedures to fix the problem faced by the first crew. On June 6, 1971, a crew of 3 cosmonauts was again ferried by the Soyuz 11 mission to the Salyut 1. This time, the crew successfully docked with the Salyut 1 module and entered into it, following which they remained on board for 383 orbits for 24 days, setting a new space endurance record. During this time, the three cosmonauts conducted a series of experiments in astrophysics, biology, Earth observations, and technology and studied the effects of long-term weightlessness on themselves. On June 29, the crew began their return trip to Earth on board the Soyuz 11 but met with a tragic death due to the sudden depressurization of their spacecraft, as the cosmonauts at the time did not wear suits while in flight. Following the accident, the Soviet engineers redesigned the Soyuz spacecraft, and several changes were made to Soviet policy. However, these changes could not be adopted while Salyut 1 remained in orbit. Therefore, all further trips to the space station were cancelled, and the controllers commanded the station into a destructive re-entry over the Pacific Ocean on October 11, 1971, marking an end to its 175-day extended stay in space. The Soviets verified their new Soyuz spacecraft design through a 6-day uncrewed test flight in June 1972, and in the next month, they attempted a launch of the second Salyut, a twin of the first space station. However, one of the Proton rocket's second stage engines failed, and the Salyut 2 could not make it to orbit. New space stations. In 1984, the 40th U.S. President, Ronald W. Reagan, directed NASA to develop and build a permanent Earth-orbiting space station and called for international participation in the project, which culminated in the International Space Station, ISS, which involved participation from the US, Russia, Canada, Japan, and the European Space Agency. Launched on November 20, 1998, the ISS is currently the largest modular space station in low Earth orbit, LEO. Russia's contribution to the ISS is the Azvizda service module, launched in 2000, which allows the permanent human occupancy of the station. It was a backup module for the base block of the Mir